Steve Gardner does a great job covering baseball for USA Today, and kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline on this Thursday. How you been, pal?
Oh, good, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well. Always good to catch up with you. Before we get to the Mets with Bruce, I'm curious what happened yesterday with the Garrett Cole. I know it was reported that he was going to get moved, then he was traded, then he wasn't traded. I mean, what's the latest on Cole here?
I'll tell you what, Rich. I think we are so starved for any kind of news this offseason that it may have just been that whatever sources that the reporters had, they wanted to go with it and get some news out there before everything was all signed, sealed, and delivered. So I don't know. I'm sure that the Astros would like to add Garrett Cole. I think the Pirates would like to trade him and get something back. But there may be more than one suitor in this instance. You know, the Yankees have always had their eye on Cole, you know, from back even before he was drafted. So I think that there may be some competition perhaps for Garrett Cole to get traded somewhere.
Yeah, and we know that any type of move yet, you know, it's not inevitable, as you just alluded to. With that being said, if Cashman wanted to pull the trigger here, he probably wants to make this trade on his terms. I would assume no Torres then. You know, do you have to give up another pitching prospect? Maybe you throw in a guy like Adams. I mean, what do you think it would take to pull off that trade?
Yeah, I can't see the Yankees giving up Torres just because, you know, he could possibly be part of the equation this season, and such a high ceiling for him. I would think, yes, it would be a Chance Adams or somebody like that. Probably maybe a little bit more too, because Cole still has some years of control. So it would have to be definitely for Pittsburgh a possibility of somebody, you know, multiple players and guys that are not that far from the major leagues.
I was trying to think of some of the ballparks that would not be conducive to his pitching because he gave up a career-high 31 home runs last year. And I know he's 27 right now. I'm wondering, though, if you are a team, are you a little more wary of the fact that he relies a little more less on his fastball, more on his off-speed pitches? And I mentioned last year, 18 of career-high 31 home runs he gave up came off a fastball. So, I mean, are there some – look, he didn't have a very strong season. I think he had a mediocre season, to be honest. So, you know, there are still some potential cons if you want to make a trade, because you're also thinking maybe you can revitalize his career, but it's got to be in the right fit, the right spot.
Yeah, and he's young enough, as you said. You know, he's only, 26, going into his age 27 season. There's still plenty of upside left. And, you know, because he does get a decent number of strikeouts, and really the home runs were only an issue last year. In his career previously, he's not been that kind of guy. And, you know, with the home run environment these days, it's kind of hard if you throw that many innings to not give up a whole bunch of home runs. So I think certainly there's an advantage to getting a guy who was taken number 1 overall in the draft, and a guy with that kind of talent, and still at age 27. I think he's certainly a catch for anybody to want to trade, especially if you're looking to win now.
There are still a ton of outfielders on the market, and we just saw the Mets bringing back free agent Jay Bruce. It looks like a 3-year, $39 million contract. Again, you saw what he was able to do. Split between the Mets and Cleveland. I know he was drawing some interest from San Francisco. I never saw. I didn't want the Mets to actually get rid of him. I thought Bruce, you know, provided a little pop in that lineup, and he's a veteran guy. He's a good clubhouse leader, if you will. But I'm looking at this number. That's the second highest for a free agent position player this offseason. And the other one is in our backyard with Carlos Santana with the Philadelphia Phillies with that 3-year guaranteed $60 million contract. Back in December. So what's your thoughts on the Mets bringing back Bruce?
Well, I still don't think from an actual standpoint, certainly from the Mets. I mean, as a large market team, now whether they spend like a large market team or not is a different subject. But I don't think that's way out of line with what you would have for, you know, a guy who's 30 years old and has the track record that Bruce does. I mean, he's one of the most consistent power hitters in all of baseball. You look at his track record for 10 major league seasons. He's had 20 homers in all but one of them. He's had 5 seasons of 30 homers and 97-plus RBI. So, I mean, he's a guy that you can count on. The batting average, not great, but still, he's certainly a power bat that any club and certainly the New York Mets can use. So I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing. I think the slow off season, a lot of the teams, whether you throw the collusion word in there or not, they're waiting to see how the market shakes out, and the longer you wait, generally the better it is for the teams, the buyers, rather than the players who are trying to sell their services.
If you go by right now, if you look at their potential starting outfield in 2018, I mean, you're talking about 3 guys that combine can hit you 75 to 85 home runs. I mean, if you go by Cespedes in left, Conforto in center, and Bruce in right. Conforto's coming off a monster year as well before he had the injury with the dislocated shoulder, but he had 27, 28 home runs. You already know Cespedes, so sometimes Cespedes will have that stretch where he'll be pretty hot for a month, or he's a slow starter and then he cools off, or then he gets hot. But again, the power is there. So you're talking about a lot of power in that outfield.
Yeah, I worry though that Conforto coming off of that, the shoulder surgery, is he going to be an everyday center fielder? I don't know that he can be that guy. I don't know if his body will handle that, and so you've got to have Juan Lagares in there and great. He's great on defense, but I think this kind of, to me, it seems like it stunts Conforto's growth a little bit. And we got, the same sort of situation we had last spring with the Mets. Too many outfielders and not enough spots. So I think you could see Jay Bruce playing more first base this season for the Mets. And when everybody's healthy, I think that may be the way that they can get all of the bats in there and get the benefit of their best offensive players. I think it's a move that maybe the Mets needed to make from an offensive standpoint, but I think it does hurt Michael Conforto's growth because he's not going to be able to play full time every day. That's
a really good point, because I know the Mets have said they're not sure, even though the rehab's going well. He's still a question mark to be ready for opening day. And if you mention Juan Lagares, but you also have Brandon Nimmo as well. Pardon me. Right. So, another option in the outfield. You talk about some of the position players, and we talk about some of the high-priced free agent pitchers out there. Again, it seems as though I think this is kind of a year, Steve, at least offseason, where it has been somewhat quiet. I mean, when you think about it, if Trout never signed that new contract, he would have been a free agent this offseason. So, there would be news on that every day. But going back to the pitchers, I mean, when it's all said and done, you look at a guy like Yu Darvish, where will he land?
Great question. It's intriguing to me that that he might land with the Minnesota Twins. I think they're one of those teams that has some money to spend and is in position to make a move this year, as opposed to the teams that we know are going to be in the playoff hunt. The Cubs, the Astros, the Yankees, all apparently on Darvish's short list of teams that he's interested in. But the Twins, they're interesting, and I don't know that Darvish will really give them full consideration, because like I said, those other 3 and possibly going back to Texas, another option for him. But I would love to see Darvish front that Twins rotation, because they're a really exciting team, I think, and one that's on the rise. But yeah, obviously the teams that are really good and can use another starting pitcher to put them over the hump, perhaps, those would be the favorites. Those Cubs, the Astros, and the Yankees.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Twins too. It kind of came out of nowhere, and you know that they had good starting pitching because they were a pretty good road team for a young team last year, close to 90 wins, 85 last year, and having that one-game playoff against the Yanks. How about the move that the Phillies have made? The Phillies have quietly, they've brought back some arms. They've added a little depth at the bullpen. They make a move for, as I alluded to, Santana. I mean, what do you make of the Phillies during this offseason and winter?
I like what they're doing. It's not a quick fix or anything like that, but you've got some guys that are coming up, through the minor leagues. Scott Kingery probably is going to be in Philadelphia at some point. You've seen Rhys Hoskins come in and have such a huge impact last season. This is and Aaron Nola, I think, is a guy that can take that next step forward. We haven't seen the best of him yet. So, yeah, this is definitely a team that's on the rise, got some good young talent coming. And I think when you and I talked last, Rich, we discussed the possibility of the Phillies maybe finding that veteran player to come in and be the glue that maybe ignites this rebuilding. I suspected it might be Evan Longoria, but it comes in and Carlos Santana fills that kind of role, I think. And so that to me shows that the Phillies are willing to make that a commitment. And I don't know if there's another free agent that they're going to bring in or anything else major that they're going to do this offseason, but they're moving in the direction toward competing. And I think that's what Phillies fans have to be encouraged about.
I was still under the impression, and when we spoke to Scott Profrock, I kind of needled him a little bit on this. I think they're enamored with the arms that they already have. And I just think if, this is a team that won 66 games. They have a young infield. They've got some depth. They got a ton of prospects. We already know that they've got some power in that lineup as well. They've got some solid players. Whether it's the Francos Hernandez, the Herreras, the Altairs, they've got some players they can work with. I'm just a little surprised they haven't gone after another frontline starter.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that a lot of times that's the last piece of the puzzle too. And I think one of the things that you might see, I mean, the Phillies with Tommy Hunter and Pat Neshek, I think this is one of those opportunities for them to maybe build the bullpen up a little bit and be a good candidate, especially with the youth of the starting rotation. Be one of those teams that has their starters maybe go through the lineup only twice and then turn things over to the bullpen, with the possible exception of Nola. Getting those guys that can just get them to the fifth or the sixth inning, and you build the bullpen up and take it from there. I think that's probably that might be a way that they go about things. Gabe Kapler is obviously a guy who's very into the numbers and the analytics. And right now, if you don't have those starters that can take you deep into games, the Darvishes and Arrietas and guys like that, if you're not going to go after those guys, then you need to kind of piecemeal it together. And I think that's probably where the Phillies are at this point, and I think Kapler's a guy that could possibly make that work.
I'll let you get out on this. I was talking about it the other day. I don't know if there's a really good follow on Twitter, and I'm probably going to butcher his last name, but it's Ryan. I believe it's pronounced Thibodeaux or Thibodeau. He's a baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah. Do you follow him on Twitter?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, of course, I figured you did. That's a foolish question. But did you see the update with the right? Exactly, right. You know something about baseball. Do you see the updates on the ballots revealed? The 176 ballots. I think he pinned it, and it's got Clipper and Vlad and Tomei and Edgar Martinez and Hoffman. And then you go all the way down, and you see Mussina at 73%, Schilling at 67%. I said this yesterday. Andruw Jones at 5.1%. It seems as though we forget just how great of a player a guy like Andruw Jones was.
Yeah, it's funny because I did a piece for USA Today about, we're going through all the Hall of Fame guys and their candidacy and the case for and against, and I wrote about Andruw Jones. And to tell you, for 10 years, the first 10 years of his career, he was on a certain lock Hall of Fame case, because not only, the great defense, I think you can say pretty confidently that Andruw Jones is the best defensive center fielder of his generation, maybe since Willie Mays. He was that good. And to combine that with the power hitting that he did, and all the home runs, had 51 home runs one year, that is a definite Hall of Famer for the first 10 years of his career. And do we count that as, and just say, if you look at that by itself, do you judge him on that? I think what's hurting Andruw Jones, number one, the crowded ballot, and him being in his first year on the ballot, I think that hurts him. But the fact that he just went so far downhill so fast, and almost like, when he signed with the Dodgers as a free agent and came to camp, he was overweight. and it's almost seemed like he didn't care. And I think that's where the Hall of Fame voters say, well, if I'm going to make a choice between him and Edgar Martinez or somebody else that's maybe on the borderline of actually getting inducted, I leave Andrew Jones off. But I definitely think he deserves to stay on the ballot and get a closer look, because he was just so good defensively and was very good offensively for an awful long time until he sort of fell off that cliff. And when you do that and you are so bad for the last few years of your career, that's kind of what sticks with people. And you need to look at the entire career as a whole.
All I know is that his Braves career, you can say, is a Hall of Fame career. If you just go, the resume.
And they made the playoffs every year.
I know.
Too. They were a playoff team every single year.
Yeah. Before I let you get it, you think Messina gets in?
I don't think so this year, but I think eventually he will. I get a vote in 2020, so if he can stay on the ballot for a couple more years, then he would certainly get my vote. I mean, he was so consistently good, and you just had to. It was a minefield going through the AL East, whether when he was with Baltimore or with the Yankees. He was just so consistently good every year, year in, year out, for such a long time. I think he certainly deserves to be in.
Yeah. Do you look at him as some of those all-time great pitchers that Dios have had?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'm talking when you go back to like the Palmers and the Quick. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Jim Palmer and then those guys had a little bit longer tenure with Baltimore, but certainly from what he did, he was the rock in that rotation. And those Orioles teams were very good. He just didn't get over the hump in Baltimore, and it certainly wasn't his fault.
Yeah, it's amazing too when you think about it. He spent 9 years in Baltimore, 10 years, and I think 7 or 8 years in New York as well. And he won 20 games one time in his career, and that was his last year in the majors.
Right, exactly.
So,
exactly.
yeah,
very
exactly. Steady Eddie was definitely the moose. All right, my friend, great stuff as always. Appreciate it. We will talk next week. Always appreciate a little hot stove baseball. Especially, you got to break up the monotony a little bit because we do so much NFL, but it's always good to talk a little baseball with you, pal.
You betcha, Rich.
All right,
always a pleasure.
You got it. Take care of yourself. Steve Gardner joining us again.